So, copying began in the ancient world, where it was done, well, in most countries with a pen on a writing surface. Basically, you read one copy of the book and you wrote another. Now, this technology was not very efficient, but it had certain other interesting consequences. First of all, no economy of scale. To make 10 copies, basically you had to make one copy 10 times. And it took 10 times as long. Another consequence was it required no special skills beyond literacy itself. And another consequence was, another fact about this technology was no special equipment was required other than the equipment for writing anything. The result was a decentralized system of copies. Anywhere that there was a copy of a book and someone else wanted to make one more, he could do so. And he would do so. And that's how copies were made. And in the ancient world, there was nothing like copyright. So if you had a copy of a book and you wanted to make another, then nobody tried to stop you or ever thought of stopping you, except if the local ruler didn't like what the book said, in which case he might put you in prison or kill you or whatever. Now, this was not quite the same thing as copyright. This was censorship, which is closely related to copyright. But then, anyway, that was the situation in the ancient world. But then there was a big advance in copying technology, the printing press, which made it possible to make many identical copies very efficiently. So the printing press made copying more efficient, but not uniformly so, because it only was effective for certain cases, certain situations, certain scenarios of copying. Because the printing press was only useful for mass production. It takes a long time to set the type. But once you have set the type, you can make many identical pages fast. So, the printing press made mass production copying a lot more efficient, but had no effect on the efficiency of making one copy, because for that, the most efficient way was to write it by hand. Still, the printing press also printing press technology required expensive special equipment, the press and the type. Most people who knew how to read and write did not have a printing press. Also, it required special skills. Knowing how to write did not mean you knew how to run a printing press. I suppose it wasn't rocket science, but still it was something most literate people didn't know. So the result was a centralized system of production where copies of any given book would be mass-produced in a few places, and then they would be transported from each place to where people might want to buy them. Copyright began in the age of the printing press. For instance, copyright in England began in the 1500s as a system of censorship. Anyone that wanted to print a book had to ask for permission from the Crown. And this permission was a monopoly granted to one publisher, a perpetual monopoly. In any case, this system of censorship was eliminated in the late 1600s after a revolution. But then copyright was introduced as a system to encourage publication. And this is when copyrights were given to authors. And they were given for a limited time. A fairly short time at first. I can't remember whether it was something like 14 years. So it was there around that range. And so the idea developed that copyright was meant to benefit society. It wasn't for the sake of these authors who were given the copyrights, Rather, it was a way to modify their behavior so that they would do things that were good for society, such as write and publish. When the U.S. Constitution was written, there was a proposal that authors be given an entitlement to a copyright. This was rejected, although you'd never believe it to hear what publishers say, but it was rejected. Instead, the U.S. Constitution authorizes Congress to establish a copyright system if it wishes. And if there is a copyright system, it's supposed to exist for the purpose of promoting progress, which is a public benefit, not a benefit for authors. And it has to last for a limited time. So perpetual copyright is unconstitutional in the U.S. The movie companies want perpetual copyright, but they can't get it officially. Now, in the age of the printing press, copyright functioned as an industrial regulation. It restricted publishers, which were certain businesses. It did not restrict readers. The things a reader could do were not covered by copyright. So it was an industrial regulation on publishers, controlled by authors, and all set up in order to benefit the general public. This made it uncontroversial, easy to enforce, and arguably beneficial. It was uncontroversial since the readers were not being restricted. They had no reason to complain, and they didn't. It was easy to enforce because it only had to be enforced against certain specialized businesses, the publishers. And it's easy to find who's publishing and selling books. You don't have to invade everybody's home and computer to do that. And it was arguably beneficial for the public because the public traded away the freedom to copy books, which the public couldn't do anyway since ordinary citizens didn't have printing presses. And in exchange, they received the benefit of more writing, more books that you could read that were for sale in the bookstores, and more conversation about important issues that could help society. So, if this were the age of the printing press, I wouldn't be complaining about copyright. But the age of the printing press is gradually giving way to the age of the computer networks, another advance in copying technology, which once again makes copying more efficient. And once again, not uniformly so. Because here's what we had in the age of the printing press. Mass production, much more efficient because of the printing press, but one-at-a-time copying meant writing it over again by hand. Digital technology makes things more efficient and not uniformly so. It gives us this. It makes mass production copying somewhat more efficient, and it's a tremendous benefit for one-at-a-time copying. One-at-a-time copying is now almost as efficient as mass production. Not quite, not perfectly so, but almost. One-at-a-time copying is something our computers are very good at. So the result is a situation more like the ancient world, where everyone who can use the work can also copy it, and finds it very useful to copy it, and now wants to copy it. So copyright